time for the first demo of this module. In this demo, we are going to explore in more detail the server-side projects and focus on the web host project that will be exposing functionality for the client side. So let's now take a look at the projects that we can find in the web solution. So that is, in my case, the Acme Phonebook Demo Web Solution. When we go to the source folder, we'll see a number of projects in there. The first one is the application project. When you open it, you'll find a lot of folders. Basically, each of these folders, let's say, wrap a functionality. You can see, for example, localization, multi-tenancy, notifications, that sort of thing. Each of these are functionalities that we will have in the application, enabled by default already in the framework, that is. Now, in these folders, we'll typically find application services. For example, when I open organizations, we'll find organization unit app service. That's a class that will expose specific functionality regarding to organization units. And we'll take a look at app services later on, and we'll also need to build an application service ourselves. Next, we have the application shared project. In there, you'll typically find more or less the same folders, but in these folders, you'll now find an interface for the app service as well as DTOs. DTOs are data transfer objects. They will be used to transfer data back and forth over the API. We will be adding our own interface and our own DTOs later in this course. In the core project, we'll find more the domain layer classes. So that will contain entities, so real business entities, as well as domain services. So typically what you'll find here is classes that have more business rule functionality, as well as the DDD parts. We will not be using that really in this application that we will be building, but ASP.NET 0 itself uses it. And if you have a more complex domain than the one that we will be using, you can also add your own domain layer classes in here. Core shared is typically going to contain some helper classes, things like enumerations, things which are also being used in multiple locations, which is why they have been moved to a separate project. Then we have the Entity Framework Core project. As the name implies, this will contain, amongst others, the database context. Here you see the Phonebook Demo DB context class. That is the DB context that we will need to use and change when we add our own entities. You will find in here also all the migrations that come by default with ASP.NET 0. When we later on build our own functionality, that too will probably result in a new migration being added. The migrator project can be used for database migrations. In my case, I typically use Update Database, but you could also use this migrator to perform the updates. Then we have the Web Core project. That contains a couple of classes which are going to be used across the multiple web application heads that we have in this solution. As the core name implies, this one will contain classes which are going to be used across other applications. It's also a class library. It's not a web application. For example, this contains classes that have to do with sessions. It has some helper classes. It has some configuration classes and so on. Then we have the Web Host project. The Web Host project is a very important project for the application type that we will be using. That is Angular and .NET Core. This is actually my API endpoint that my Angular code will communicate with. So you would expect here that we have a lot of controllers. Let's take a look. As you can see, there's only a very limited amount of controllers. That is because ASP.NET 0 uses services as controllers. Service classes, the application services that we saw earlier in the application project, will be exposing their functionality automatically so that we don't have to create a controller ourselves. A lot of times controllers are just pass-throughs, and that is why these app services are going to be exposing their functionality directly so that the client-side Angular code can communicate with it. Then we also have the web public site, which is a plain ASP.NET MVC site that can be used as your company website. So what we looked at here was the web project. There are other solutions, including this all solution here, and that will contain more projects, including also the mobile projects. That is not relevant to what we are exploring here, so I'm not going to show you these in more detail. We've already touched upon them in the slides.